The girl's identification was more difficult, since there were no hands for fingerprints and with the decapitation, no opportunity for a dental comparison.
She looked like a young adolescent, teenage white girl. She also had amputations of both nipples and a number of other cuts, mostly on the front of her body. She had some very long cuts down the front of the abdomen with extrusion or evisceration of part of the intestines to the outside.
A rape test kit showed the blood found in Massey's car was tested for DNA, but it couldn't be compared to the bodies since they were too badly degraded for DNA analysis. Instead, scientists relied on reverse paternity genotyping. By analyzing the DNA profile of Brian and Christina's biological parents and comparing it to the DNA profile of the blood in Massey's car, scientists could see if there were similar genetic markers.
We were able to determine that yes, much more certainly that blood did come from Christina Benjamin.
Scientists also needed to know if the time of the deaths matched the time frame Jason Massey and his automobile were in the victim's neighborhood.
Bury him, he's guilty.
Roger Kibbe was charged with the murder of Darcy Frackenpole. On March 18, 1991, he was found guilty of murder in the first degree and was sentenced to 25 years to life. Kibbe still faces the possibility of murder charges in the other deaths.
Roger is in prison for only one murder. There has to be another trial. These other families need to see some kind of reconciliation.
Sun glinting off this white object. You could tell right away it was a skull. And I thought to myself, oh boy, we finally found it.
Along with the skull, searchers found a few strands of hair, a lower jaw, and about 40 bones, including a pelvic bone, a femur, and some ribs.
My initial thought was that it may possibly be an Indian grave until we saw the blue jean material.
Searchers unearthed the tattered remains of a pair of jeans, pieces of a flowered shirt, remnants of a plastic shopping bag, and a metal button. To begin the task of identifying the victim, the physical evidence was sent to the Forensic Crime Lab in Jefferson City, Missouri. They began their evaluation with the tattered blue jeans. viciousness of the murders even shocked the pathologist in this case.
It's the worst case of mutilation that I've seen in my work here. I have seen other cases of mutilation and seen a lot of cases of what they call the crimes of passion or overkill, where someone's stabbed or shot multiple times. But this is the only case I've seen like this where someone had this much mutilation of the body, probably after death.
Investigators learned that Charlotte had written a letter shortly before she disappeared, and that letter contained a warning. Vicky said that after Grabby choked Charlotte to death, he sodomized her. Afterwards, he used a grease gun to fill every orifice of her body to make it more flammable. He then put her body in the trash barrel and headed towards the river. After Margie had given birth to her second child, Brandon, she told social services that she couldn't identify the baby's father since the pregnancy was the result of a rape. But later, when she applied for financial aid at college, she was required to identify Brandon's father and explain why she wasn't receiving child support.
When she became a Jehovah's Witness and they began to counsel with her, they found these details out. They said, look, you can't lie. You're to tell the truth.
And she named Chuck Oswald as the father.
With this news, prosecutors asked Oswald to undergo a paternity test. It revealed that the likelihood of Oswald being Brandon's father was greater than 99%. Investigators also discovered that Oswald had refused to pay for child support when Margie asked, possibly because he didn't want his wife to find out about his infidelity.
Trying to make people understand that we needed to wake Michael up, that I wasn't going to permit them to bury Michael in the ground. I was the only living person that now knew the secret of my mother.
But it took another 27 years for Laurie to reveal the deep, dark family secret she had been harboring. In 1993, After Diane Cadeau had been missing for 27 years, her only surviving daughter, Lori, walked into the Phoenix Police Department with a written statement. It described a terrible secret she had been too afraid to reveal.
To whom it may concern, I need to convey to authorities what I witnessed as a child. First, I must greatly impress the fear I have of my father's violent retaliation. I was often told when I was a child by my father, I brought you into this world, I can take you out.
In 1995, Gene Cadeau was convicted for the murder of his wife, Diane, and was sentenced to life in prison. Ken Tranchita was sentenced to life in prison. Ironically, while Tina was living a life of deception, she too was deceived by Ken Tranchita, a con man offering the promise of a big loan. Until police got a break from an unlikely place. A woman living 2,000 miles away in Seattle, Washington, called police because she had seen the article about the murder in the Anchorage newspaper. It was one of a number of items in a package mailed to her from a friend in Anchorage.
She said she had received a box, a cardboard box from Maureen Malloy.
Inside the box were Catherine Harm's driver's license, the newspaper article, some jewelry, a knife, and this handwritten note.
Hey, woman, please burn all the contents of this box. This is very important and many lives are on the line. This would be a great favor, and in all the world, I trust only you.
The woman from Seattle told me she wanted nothing to do with this, but she didn't feel right about it, and so she thought she better call the police.
The knife appeared to be clean. Investigators wanted to know whether this was the weapon used to kill Catherine Harms. To determine whether this was an accident or murder, police needed to find the fatal bullet. It was still somewhere in the woods, but police couldn't find it. Investigators found what looked like a scrape mark on a tree about 40 feet away from where they found Judy's body. Scientists applied sodium rhodizonate, a chemical which turns purple in the presence of lead. The mark tested positive, indicating it was struck by a bullet. For weeks, Dan Castle tried to find the bullet with his metal detector, but each time came up empty.
Well, I knew the bullet was out there. It just, I was searching in the wrong area, and it was kind of getting to me. I know that the weather was going to change. We were supposed to get a lot of cold weather and snow.
Finally, he decided to try a novel experiment using a slingshot to recreate the trajectory of the bullet. He knew where Judy was standing when hit and where the bullet had hit the tree. So he fired marbles at the tree from the same trajectory angle of the fatal bullet.
So I tried to hit it near the same location as the bullet did, and I heard them ricocheting off the branches and leaves and so forth in the woods.
One of the marbles that struck the tree ricocheted almost at a right angle, somewhere, as I recall, 80, 85 feet away from the tree.
And when Castle looked around that area, he found the bullet.